Hey everyone, welcome to episode 149 of Shunya One. Amit, how are you doing?
I'm doing great and excited for our one short episode of 150, the round number,
I
which is
know,
the milestone number.
I know, right? I mean, I think we can come up with these milestones ourselves just to make a big deal out of it. But the fact is, we have had so many guests on this
I
show
know.
over the last 4 years. It's incredible. I mean, I definitely think we've crossed the 4 year mark of our
Uh-huh.
first episode release, and yeah, I'm amazed at the quality of conversations we've had so far. It's awesome.
Some of the best people to talk to. I mean, like, it's been great in that sense. But again, we are going to add to that list today with
Yeah,
Nikhil Kumar.
that's true. We're talking to Nikhil. He's the co-founder and chief evangelist of Setu. I've known Nikhil for a while prior to his, jumping on board and founding Setu, of course. And the chat we had was really interesting. I mean,
Uh,
they're another fintech company, yes,
mhm.
but they're doing some very, very cool stuff under the hood, especially.
It's all under the hood, right? Which I think is what makes it so interesting, right? The entire thing is,
Yeah,
hey, we're about powering stuff and not about you downloading my app and doing stuff, but we want to make sure that this ecosystem works for everybody. So really, really
absolutely,
impressive stuff
absolutely.
that they're
And
working on.
that's where Setu has some incredible platform level stuff going on. They're
Mhm.
obviously on the forefront of a lot of the technology ecosystem the government has been launching. So yeah,
Mhm.
it will be interesting to talk to Nikhil and
Mhm.
hear what he has to say about all the fintech that's flying around us, which we are invisible to. So
Mhm.
let's take a break and come back and talk to Nikhil.
Did you know that AI can help you recommend your next favorite podcast? In almost any field, AI can be an extremely important tool in your arsenal, but it can often seem daunting to get into. Luckily, Intel's digital readiness program is here to empower everyone with the skill sets, mindsets, and tool sets to use in an AI fueled world. So you can be ready to develop AI for sports if you want to as well. As part of Intel's AI for Youth program, Intel's been working with the CBSE, Ministry of Education, and the Government of India to empower today's youth to build social impact solutions while demystifying what exactly AI is. How do you take advantage of this? Purchase an Intel Core powered PC and you get free access to 80 plus hours of immersive and hands on training about AI. On completion of the program, along with the certificate, you get access to AI toolsets to try to put what you learn to good use. So log on to futurebanaowonderful.intel.com. Future Now Wonderful by bringing home an Intel powered PC.
Hey Nikhil, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thank you so much, Shil. I'm doing very well. I hope you guys are doing well too.
Yes. I can see you're in a lovely, very green Bangalore office. True to making us Bombay folks feel bad about living
There
in
are
the
only
city.
few things. There are only few things we can be happy about, right? Our trees and our weather, and then Bombay beats
Correct.
probably in everything else. So
I feel
Correct.
like
do send
Bombay.
some of your restaurants here. That's what we're missing.
I feel like Bombay is getting as bad or is catching up in the traffic space, though. We're
For
fast
sure.
approaching. We
I
were
want to
worse
get
than
to that.
Bangalore.
I don't.
I want to get to that point in life where people's only problem with Bangalore is just not traffic anymore, right? So we can talk about other issues like how we don't have great restaurants and stuff like that.
Oh
So
yeah, actually, those are the issues don't get talked about enough, is what you're saying. Like
yeah,
the
yeah,
other
yeah, yeah.
stuff.
Like it's always traffic. Everyone's anchored around the traffic,
Yeah.
right? So
But
That's true.
it's because it really is at that level, right? It's one of the few times I've been to Bangalore, right? It's not like I've been there that often, but the few times that I've been to Bangalore, it's just every time I go, I spend half the time in the car. A day trip is impossible in Bangalore, right? You
for
cannot
sure.
do a
Hey,
morning to
I've
evening
done it.
trip at all.
I have done it.
Really?
The trick is don't leave the car. So hold the car right there, step out, do your meeting, do get some fast food, and just be in the car all day. That's basically the trick. And then the car just takes you back to the airport. But
and
awesome,
for
man. But
everything else, we
yeah,
have Swiggy and Dunzo. You can just Dunzo
of
it to
course.
the next
That's true.
signal.
Exactly.
I'm gonna be there in 10 minutes.
Exactly. See, it all works out. So tech capital, but also, nice green capital as well. So, hey, Nikhil, so good to have you. It's as I was saying earlier, it's like this conversation has been long pending. I remember us catching up in just before you guys even figured out what you guys were probably doing, and I think it was one of the usual.
We're still figuring out, Shil. So, so
We'll
you
come to
know,
that.
we haven't come too far. So,
We will come to that, but that was easily more than 2 years ago, and at the and in the world of fintech in India, you would think that every year is like a new revolution
that's true.
from the looks of it, right? I mean, at some point we were talking about how India is leading in fintech with all of its new platform approach and whatnot. Then lending became a feature, then something else, then something every year, and like as recently as earlier this month, there was another whole new thing launched now, which I don't really know enough about, but we'll get into it since you
I
are
don't know
the
if you remember. I
fintech
don't know if
guy.
you remember this, Shil. We were basically remember I met you at this co-working space along with
Yep.
Gaurav Baheti. I think that was probably just a little before the UPI launch and like when it took off and so on. I think it was sometime in 2016 when I was visiting Bombay.
Right.
I think like just in this 5 years, a lot of stuff has happened. I remember that particular conversation because I think we were running a hackathon. There was some hackathon going, and we all had dropped by. And then along with that, we were just doing some jam on the side and figuring out some stuff to do. So we've come a long way since then. 0 to 3.5 billion transactions on UPI. So
such a long way, and jumping right into what you have been doing at Setu, or rather what Setu is, why this, Nikhil, to go a little further back also, why you and Sahil actually jumped into this problem that you want to solve. If you could give us, let's say, the origin story a little bit, or and personally also, why this was the biggest thing for you to sort of jump into.
For sure. I think, there's really no, there was no really, there's no like big story as such, but I think like, I think it's important to kind of like also like know like my background. So my parents were rural bankers. So when I grew up, a bank actually was started in my house. In my ancestral house, which is now one of India's largest like rural banks. So when I grew up, the way I understood banking was it was in the service of the poor. My parents would go into these very deep villages every day. I've never missed them. I've never seen them miss a day of work because they would be like, if I don't go, then people will not be serviced, right? So it's like being like almost like a doctor, in some sense, right? If you see that behavior in doctors, they never miss work, no matter what.
Right.
They have to go, otherwise people will suffer. And that's how my parents' lives were. So when I was growing up, there were actually not much around. Nannies and others were not big of an idea then, but like, my grandma and, a bunch of house help that kind of like, helped me like grow up. So in some sense, like when I was growing up, and I come, my family, my grandfather was actually an engineer. He literally, by the way, actually built bridges. So my grandfather was one of the chief architects of the Tawa Dam, which is the Narmada River Valley project in Madhya Pradesh. And it was one of the largest dams built at that time in India. So in some sense, there was our family has always been tuned to be, doing engineering. My parents were the outliers because, my dad decided to stay back to take care of his mother, join the bank, and, their life basically revolved around like a district and going deep into those villages and, serving in branches and so on. So when I grew up, for me, banking really was like about service, serving people. And a lot of people, I still think that, banking is actually a service. It's not really a product, and you actually service people. So for a long time, one of the things that happened to me when I was growing up is, we were whatever upper middle classes and, and so on. And a lot of things that we wanted to do in life was actually triggered by the fact that we had access to credit. You know, my mom sent me to a really good boarding school for getting better education when I was in high school, and you know, it was transformative. And you know, to the salary and the money that she was making, it was probably not possible. So she was a financial wizard. So she was able to figure out, maybe I'll borrow a little from here, and then I'll, you know, put something with my gold here and so on, and did all this, you know, financial gymnastics to be able to afford to send it. So credit was a way for us and my family to aspire and do more things, you know. And you know, while there is two angles to a simple Indian household, where you know there is the savings angle, where people are always like save, save, save. My mother actually was a little bit more about like, you know, take credit to move forward in life. So even though we were not operating like a businessman, but you know, the family, in order for us to make leaps, we need to be able to take these risks. I mean, not in a crazy way, but for the right reasons. So I didn't realize all of this till many years later, right? Until I started reflecting back. But I think some of this was, you know, kind of, you know, subconsciously in my head when I was growing up. Just like anybody else, I grew up and, you know, went to an engineering college, didn't really give a shit about anything. I was a big metalhead in college. So I had this very dark, meandering period doing like metal
we all have.
And stuff like that. And I think for me, life started after I got my first job, after I left my engineering. And that happened at Tally. And incidentally, my first job at Tally was to build e-banking inside Tally. And, you know, over a series of things, you know, many years. So my life's actually been very, you know, I've been a more take life as you go kind of a guy, you know, not really planned, but always, you know, looking for opportunities, creating, you know, new opportunities for myself and being able to enjoy what I, you know, to what I wanted to do. So one such happy coincidence was how I landed up at iSpirit. And you know, and one of the opportunities that I got to do was to work on platforms like GST and UPI. And when I worked on UPI, you know, many times we learn things by reading and seeing and stuff like that, you know, but I think the best learning happens by doing, right? So, you know, your beliefs become stronger, you know, that forms your beliefs. So for me, UPI was one such journey. So when I saw this, that, hey, you know, when you're able to get APIs very naively as a child, like saying, hey, if we get APIs outside the bank and give it to like a bunch of people and get them to build cool stuff, maybe these guys will build some cool stuff and, you know, something will come out of it. It was just that simple, naive, childish thinking. And when, you know, and when we actually saw that happen, you know, every year on year, new people coming on board on UPI, you know, new customers and the new type of like products that got built. So I kind of had this fundamental belief that you could transform something, you know, in a massive scale if you're able to create a platform, if it's a co-creation platform which enables people to participate, bring them together, and if you're able to orchestrate. And then I asked, we were, you know, Sahil and I knew each other. Sahil worked very early at Aadhaar. So in some sense, he had gone through something similar in his life very early, you know, because he was part of the early team at Aadhaar and had seen, you know, the beginnings of it and so on. So in some sense, we met together in 2016. And he was like almost like a guide, mentor to me, you know, on many things and advice in life, girlfriends, and, you know, all of that stuff. So, one day, you know, when I was completing my fellowship at iSpirit, Sahil basically said, hey, look, I quit my job. I think we should do something together. And for almost a couple of months, we kept toying around with some random ideas. So one of the trip I was on at that time was like, how do we change the political system in India? Like, what if we create a new political
party? I remember that, I think.
You remember? So I think I might have probably spoken to you about it. So I was like, what's happening? Like, there's so much technology and internet. I genuinely believe, like, religion, political parties, they're all like $1 billion ideas to be done in the next 20, 30 years, right? So,
They are. I'm sure they are.
so,
Some folks are on it. We just have to get through the red tape like we did with finance.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
So
some people would consider that we're already there from a religion perspective, right?
Religion is
Apple's a
happening.
yeah, Apple's a
Reli-
religion, Microsoft's a religion, Elon Musk is a religion. Many ways, like they have some of the characteristics about There's some essays about this stuff, right? There that some of the cult-like aspects that you see when it comes to these different quote-unquote tribes that exist in technology, right, are very religious, very religious in nature and structure.
many
But
years ago, before this thought, I actually wanted to do a religion. So I'm sure all of you watched Big Lebowski, right?
uh,
The
Yeah,
dude.
yeah.
I'm a big fan of the dude. So, there was a point in time in my life, very embarrassing. My wife hates me for that now. But, like, me and a couple of my friends, we actually used to talk to each other and walk like the dude. We were like, why are you doing this? This is how the dude does it, right? And when we came back home, we would become the dudes. And one day we actually went to buy the domain, and we said,
uh,
so we used to keep saying dudism, dudism, because we're like, why are you doing this? Because dudism and shit like that. And we said, I think, look, this is what we have here is special. So we need to bring a bunch of people like this together. And we actually we went to buy the domain, and we were surprised that there is actually a cult called dudism.
Why wouldn't there be?
So
It's so obvious.
you can actually go to Wikipedia. You'll actually see it. There is a cult, and if you look at their principles, that's the only
It
religion that's
resonated
appealed
with
to me,
you.
resonated with me. I'm like, these are my people, you know. So yeah, so very this thing about first principles, like thinking about like what are the major problems, and one of the things about working at iSpirit and with folks like Nandan Nilekani, Sharat Sharma, Sanjay Jain, Pramod Verma, and everybody else is like, when you're with as they say, like, when you're with a bunch of people and you become the average of them. So these are super, super smart people. So, for me, it was just like a chance pe dance to be amongst like all these amazing people. And they're all thinking about like, how do I solve India's like financial problem? And one is saying like, how do we solve like primary education? How do we solve healthcare? So the orbit at which we were thinking about problems itself was a different layer. Nandan used to very say this, that the effort that it takes to solve an easy problem and a hard problem is the same. Is that you got to choose, which layer at which do you want to operate. So that's where the political trip was coming from. I'm like, okay, it's a national scale problem. So what if we start a political party? And obviously, AAP was, a big inspiration. And we said, what if we put platform technology and all that stuff and like build like a community driven political party of sorts. All of this went non-venture fundable and stuff like that, right? So and around that time, I was just like I said, bhatakta hua atma, like thinking about problems. And Sahil and I, basically around in 2018, he became a dad. And, I don't know what Tashan happens to people. Then he's like, look, I'm quitting my job now. I want to do a startup. I don't want to work for someone. So we decided that we should work together, and we basically talked about a lot of different ideas and problems we wanted to solve. And another day, and we were not converging. And then we decided, hey, look, one day we were like, let's just take a step back, and what if we just agree on these principles, that let's do what we love doing, let's work on problems, and let's align on those base principles, and then let's figure out what we want to do. So I think for a lot of people, it seems very obvious that, since I worked on UPI and things like that, that we would have built something like Setu, but it was not. We went through all this goal chakkar and all these things to arrive at this. And we said, what are the problems that we are mostly passionate about. And if you look at India broadly, you want to solve, like the roti kapda makan equivalent of high level problems in India is financial services, education, healthcare, and jobs, right? Like
Yeah.
at a macro economic level. So we said we don't know enough about all the other three things, but at least finance is something that we have worked upon. So why don't we continue our commitment to the problem that we were working on? And that's how we kind of like zeroed upon the problem area. And what do we do there? So our theory of change is that as India is a very extremely diverse country, every business and every individual's financial life is unique.
Hmm.
So currently, the way you are, I mean, we might have common interests and things like that, but your financial life is probably going to be extremely unique compared to me, right? Almost like,
Yeah. Yeah.
like everyone, there are enough variables in each one's lives to make that unique.
Yeah. Like,
Um,
and everything, like what you save, how you spend, what you invest in, like all the variables is what you're talking
Not
about.
just
And
that, Shil.
financial.
No, also your social, your life around you. Your
Hmm.
family situation. You
Yeah.
might be,
Yeah.
you might have, parents, or you might have, like siblings that you might
Dependence
need to
and yeah, yeah.
support. So
Yeah.
so there's all these other factors that determine, how your financial life is, and
Right.
for a long time the way financial services is being done is you take financial products and you try to find the right people and distribute it to them, right? In the sense that, as many things, distribution has always dictated design of products. uh,
Hmm.
so we said that, if we were to flip this and say how do we make financial products affordable and accessible to everybody in India, and that's our mission
Hmm.
statement in the company. And in order to do this, we have to do this, in these three levels. One is there is this amazing public digital infra that's being built in India, which is the UPI, Aadhaar, e-sign, so on and so forth, account aggregator, which is the talk of the town now. And then how do we leverage all of this public digital infra to design new financial products which are
Hmm.
relevant to each of these individuals, and then distributed them through these third party applications or people or apps that you already use. So in some
Hmm.
sense UPI was that inspiration, right? So I genuinely believe, if 5 years ago the idea that someone could build a payments app on top of banks was unthinkable. That
Yeah.
the like it was a category creator, right? There was no phone pay
Hmm.
or a Google Pay in our lives. So the moment you are able to bring out APIs and build an innovation system, you were able to now create these, and they were going and acquiring the customers, and and so on. So we said, what if we could do the same for banking products? What if we could do this for fixed deposits? What if we could do this for bill payments? What if we could do this for lending? What if we could do this for insurance? And that's how, and that's really our hypothesis, that we work with,
Hmm.
financial institutions, help them leverage the best of digital public infrastructure that's available, design new financial products, and then distribute it through new channels that they never distributed through. So, for example, can the Ola driver who actually is probably, or taking a loan from some loan shark to run his, they might be borrowing on an everyday basis, right? Most
Hmm.
of India borrows intraday loans. They take money in the morning and they're supposed to pay back in the evening, or some
Yeah.
run on a weekly schedule. What if he actually could get access to a formal financial institution and get a loan from a bank or an NBFC at a much lower cost? It's insane the amount of cost that people pay. Sometimes people pay at bare minimum 5% per day as their interest
Yeah.
rate. So
Yeah.
if you borrow 1,000 rupees,
Ridiculous.
you only get like 950 rupees, right? So 50 rupees actually is deducted at source as your interest,
Yeah.
and you have to repay $1,000 at the end of the day. So there is this massive, change that needs to happen. I think genuinely we are still in our early days of the internet in India. In financial services, I think it's the 90s of the internet. I think there is the 2000s, and or maybe the 2000s of the internet.
Yeah.
Probably, I think there
Yeah.
is still a long way to go, and I think that end goal is when probably money becomes self-driving, right? So and
Nice.
just like how the world started with GPS and internet then, and now we are dealing with the era of self-driving cars. I think money will also this will happen to money as well, maybe in the next 10 to 15 years. So what we're trying to do is, how do we build infrastructure to make this happen? What do people
Got it.
need, and who do we need to work with, and how do we like imagine and reimagine some of these questions why things work the way they are. So Setu in some sense is a bunch of like curious finance and tech geeks just asking these questions, saying how do we reimagine, how do we re-engineer these things. Yeah, and that's really what we're doing. And the name Setu is basically a bridge, and many jokes. So the way we arrived at it is, like we said, what's the closest we can find to API in Sanskrit? And
Wow.
and we said, APIs are nothing but software bridges. It connects software applications together, and so there we are Setu.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
yes, that's really our story. So.
Wow, super interesting
Brilliant.
stuff.
Brilliant. I mean, Nikhil, I mean, there's so much detail I want to unpack in obviously to, get into the meat of the matter. And thanks for giving us this overview. But what I'm going to do is take a quick break and come back and dig into the building of Setus that you have. So, Amit, Intel's impressing me yet again.
You heard about Intel vPro, huh?
Yeah, I did. Exactly. I mean, imagine you're a security and IT manager. There's nothing like Intel vPro out there. It basically helps you protect your entire organization's computers from like cyber attacks and basically keep them functioning all the time.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, right? I mean, like cybersecurity is like a major deal these days, right? I know that both at work and at home, I'm really taking a lot more care about these things than I used to.
Exactly. And the way I see it, right? I mean, Intel has obviously developed this a lot. They have something called a threat detection technology. They have something called a hardware shield. It's basically everything that you need to protect your entire organization from stuff like ransomware, crypto mining, all of these latest sort of threats that are out there. So I love it.
And you know what's really cool? It's not just that, right? They also have this below the OS security, which is basically used for hardware and firmware changes to identify when stuff happens over there, or when there's stuff when there is like malfeasance happening on your application or data protection stuff. So I mean, like this really helps with memory corruption, all that kind of stuff, right? So they're just basically kind of helping to really reduce the number of attack surfaces an organization has.
Exactly. And that's what a business needs, right? I mean, pretty much a business wants that, okay, I have one platform and I get all my checkboxes around, all these various small things that I need to protect it. So it's good to see that Intel's developing a platform that's built for businesses.
Yeah, and it really is, right? I mean, like, it's even the cloud-based manageability of all these services, right? So basically, everything can be done remotely, whether it's managing or repairing these systems. You can just basically nobody has to go anywhere, especially in these times. I think that really does help.
Oh yeah, I mean, during work from home, it's basically exactly what you need. It's like it's a godsend sort of technology.
Amen to that. And so remember, everybody, just go check out Intel vPro and Intel's other amazing products at intel.in/IT heroes. Remember, Intel vPro, it's built for business.
Hey, welcome back, guys. Nikhil, you've been explaining obviously exactly the amazing origin story of how you arrived at what Setu is doing today, and we have a few questions to sort of dig into, to unwrap a little bit of that. Amit, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So Nikhil, so from what I understood of how you guys have implemented, right? You're working with banks, you're working with software applications, you're working with both of them, right? So how does so I mean, like, so I guess two questions here, right? It's culturally very different to work with a bank versus working with a app developer or something like that, right? I mean, like the way that you would approach them, the cycles in terms of like how long decisions take to make all of that, right? So how do you all navigate that? And and a follow-up question that somewhat is also, who pays you, right? I mean, like, fundamentally, do you get money from the bank, do you get money from the app, or do you get money from both in some sense, or however that works?
Super. So I think, like, what's important to know is, like, as you rightly said, like, who are we really here to serve? Like, who's our, like, in whose service are we in, or who's our actual customer persona? And the answer to that is the users that we really want to service, consumers and businesses in India, right? And our mission statement is like, can we have like a positive impact, from a financial services perspective, with at least 500 million people in 5 years. So when you want to do something like that, you work backwards from that goal. So now you need to think very differently. And the way we have done this is that, so what do consumers want to do in India? So now, for example, like people had to get a digital identity, people got bank accounts, and now people are being enabled on digital payments. So the question that we asked is, what is the second order effect of you being digitally enabled on UPI? Right. The first order effect, we all know, you can send money, blah, blah, blah. So for example, bill payments was such one low hanging fruit as an example. Right. So the one obvious thing that will get digitized is the more and more bill payments that's happening in India. Right. Commerce will get more and more digitized. CODs have to come down. Right. So like 60-70% of e-commerce orders are still CODs today. So these are your second order effects in some sense. So what we have done is we have basically looked at the user's life and looked at a consumer and looked at a business and said, what are the different financial products do they need in their life, right? And how can we create these digital financial products? And, a lot of people have, like, finance, I think, has been running on this arbitrage of complication than simplification in the last few years. And I think this is like generally true for a lot of businesses, right? So the more information arbitrage, and I think financial services is one of them, where people have worked towards complication, not towards simplification. So I think that so the way we have been thinking about it is a bit of counterintuitive to say, how do we simplify and what are the different products that a user will need in their lifetime? So for example, you'll need a bank account, you'll need a payment application, you'll need a deposit account, you'll need some investment products, you'll need insurance, and you'll need credit. So broadly at Setu, we have kind of characterized our infrastructure into three large areas: payments infrastructure, data infrastructure, and accounts infrastructure. So what we believe is, if you can put together the payments and data infrastructure together, you'll be able to create these new accounts, which is like an FD product or an RD product, or it could be a liquid fund or whatever it is.
Or something else. Basically, it need not follow current structures, is what you're saying.
It could be a crypto token for all we care, and you'll probably need the money rails for money in and money out to happen. So if we look at this from a Lego blocks perspective of financial services, so these are the three kind of like large infrastructures that we need. So what we do, Amit, is we look at the user's need. Where is the world going, or where should the world go in the next 3 to 5 years? So we have a point of view about the future. Right. And maybe we are right, wrong, we don't know. Only time will tell. But our job is to have like a point of view. And we have a point of view saying that this is how the world is going to shift. And what are the products that users want? Once we identify that, we then go and identify what is the supply side, which is essentially who are the financial institutions do we need to make this happen. So I want to give credit to the banks because, in the last few years, especially with the advent of UPI, there is a sea change in the way they think and believe, right? More and more banks want to partner. In 2017, I can tell you, I used to come to Bombay and like talk about API banking, and I would start with full form of APIs and explaining why, and so on. Yeah. And today in 2021, we are in a place where every bank has their own developer platform, developer portal, and things like that. I think Indian banking, has come a long way in the last 5 years than actually we give credit to the bankers. So I do think there is a sea change that's happening. So that's the second very important stakeholder that we work with. So many a times it's really not the intention of the bank, but it's whether the regulations, the compliance architecture allows us to do what we want to do. Once we have supply side ready, then we say, okay, for these products, who are the right demand partners that we need to work with? So in some sense, you're absolutely right, but we look at this like a triangle. So you have user on one end, you have a financial institution on the other end, and then we have the app or the developer or the distribution partner on the other end. It's just that all of this kind of converges around, like, like people say API is UX, right? So you start with the user, you figure out what is the user experience you want to deliver, and then you work backwards. So within the company, we have two sets of people. We are learning also to do this well, which is a set of people who are extremely empathetic towards the banks, who work with the banks and work with them. There are people who are extremely empathetic to the developers and the tech companies, and working on our docs, our SDKs, and stuff like that. And then there are people who are super empathetic to the users, right? So it's been a learning journey for us, but like that's how we are kind of structured.
So,
On the business, sure.
sorry, we can get. Sorry to interrupt you, and maybe the business I can follow up with you on later. Can you give an example of like how you've kind of put how you put this triangle together in some ways? Like in again, you all have a number of APIs out there right now. So maybe just kind of like an example would help illustrate how these three stakeholders kind of play together.
Perfect. So I'll take a couple of examples. So one, let's just take payments infrastructure, right? So while there is so much room for yet we have so far to there's so much distance to still cover in digital payments, right? So there are a lot of use cases that are still cash bound in India. Right? So for example, one of them is, let's say, like loan recollections, as an example, right? So we have taken, say, something like UPI infrastructure from the bank. So we said we work backwards, saying what is the most. So somebody in a tier 2 or a tier 3 town, let's say, who's taken a loan from a lender, what is the most seamless experience for them, right? And we said, look, why can't a loan repayment be as seamless and as painless as making a mobile recharge or an electricity repayment? Because at the end of the day, what are you doing? You're taking money from your account and giving it to somebody else. So one of the things that we have done is, for example, is work with a number of financial institutions, lenders, and banks and NBFCs, and we have brought them onto what is called as the Bharat Bill Payment System, right? And once they've been onboarded, so you can now open up a Phone Pay or a Google Pay. So an example of this is, let's say, there's a bank called Ujjivan Financial Services, which serves bottom of the pyramid. And Ujjivan's customers are people who are partly digitized, but are on the path to getting digitized. So if we were to take 3 to 5 years from now, most of Ujjivan's customers are most likely going to have a smartphone, right? So Ujjivan is now live as what we call as a biller, which is essentially on the Bharat Bill Payment System. And an Ujjivan agent can go to Shiladitya, or it could be even an agent calling him and saying, Shil, your loan needs to be repaid. Can you just open up, if you have a UPI app, can you open up Phone Pay or Google Pay, enter your loan account number, make a payment, and then the payment flows seamlessly from Phone Pay to Ujjivan, and you don't have to visit the branch at all, which might be like 5, 10, 15, 20 kilometers far away. This is just like one simple example of working backwards from the user side. Another example, is fixed deposits. So this is something which is very counterintuitive, right? So, there is a part of our lives and our worlds where we are like, FD is a bad instrument. We should not invest money in FD. It should go into the markets. We should get people to start into mutual fund and SIPs and so on and so forth. But, that's the top of the pyramid problem. Right? The bottom of the pyramid problem is that the money is still going into real estate, gold, and chit funds, which are like much riskier and bad instruments. So we said, how do we reimagine fixed deposits digitally to users? And what if ordering a fixed deposit was as simple as ordering a pizza on Swiggy or Zomato? Right? And we work backwards from that, because we ask people, where do you save your money? So we run a research lab called D91 Labs, where we just go and talk to people and just ask them what their financial lives and stories look like. And it's very clear that people want to keep money in FDs. So whether it's, is that the right thing for them? Maybe yes, because they don't have enough money to actually graduate, instead of putting money into chit funds and so on. So we took that user view and we went to a banking partner and said, hey bank, can we create an FD flow which is so seamless that anybody can without need. So one of the problems with FDs where banks forced you to open a savings account or a current account, so to open an
Yes.
FD.
And then
So
move the money. Yes.
and then
That's
move the
what.
money. So we went to the bank and said, hey guys, why do we really need to do that? Why can't we just open an FD account directly with you? And we were very lucky. We had great banking partners. So they worked with us and they gave us the APIs where we could directly open an FD. Guess using what? Using Aadhaar and UPI. So the cost of opening the FD was so low,
Right.
which is less than like 15 to $20. Now we were able to shrink the size of FDs that you can book. So right now we're doing it 5,000 rupees. We want to bring it down to 500 rupees, and eventually get to a place where we can also allow you to create like a daily savings product, for example, right? And then we built this FD product, and then we are now distributing it through a platform like Google Pay. So Google has a platform called Spot, which enables any business to have a flow or an application flow inside Google Pay. So Google Pay is a reference implementation of this product. Tomorrow, this could be done on a Flipkart website if Flipkart wants to sell FDs, or it could be done on an ET Money or a Paytm Money, or it could be done on an investment app like Fisdom, or and so on and so forth. So this is like another example of how we are trying to reimagine financial products and make them digital, sachet-sized, and distributed through new channels that they were not done before.
Awesome. Thanks, man. That's actually
Very cool.
super. Yeah, super.
Yeah, and the
It helps
example was
clarify.
very
Like,
cool
yeah,
too.
it really clarifies the idea. Sorry, Shiladitya, please.
Yeah, and see, I mean, I remember you were said earlier, right? The reason you're able to do this obviously is the current base of infrastructure we have today, the various distribution channels that exist today. So you're building more rails that exist between these existing bigger rails.
One
In
way
a
to
way.
think about it, Shil, is that infrastructure when you build needs to lead to some form of innovation and not just
Right.
efficiency improvements. So a lot of the current things that we're doing has just been about like how do I improve my efficiency, right? But
Right.
not thinking that this is an enabling infrastructure. It's like, look, I'll use the internet and I could probably send emails. Maybe that's like the first use case. That's great. But there is a Facebook and an Instagram opportunity or a Tesla opportunity that's going to come in the future. So what we are trying to see is that all of this is this enabling infra. We know that you can collect money digitally in India. You can now do KYC digitally in India. You can now get data digitally in India. What is the second order effect of this going to be? And that's the question that we keep asking. And and maybe like I said, some places we might be right, some places we might be wrong. But a lot of us thinking has been like I said, to have a point of view of what will all this enable. What's the point of all of this? Is it to save some dollars on your acquisition cost, or are you going to fundamentally redesign? It's like, imagine if there was no GPS on the internet. The car companies still manufacture the cars the way they are, right? So you need a Tesla moment to happen where people like fundamentally redesign things and make an orbit shift. And that's really what we're trying to do at Setu. Try to be like a product studio for new digital financial products to be built, and and prove them one by one, build confidence, and get more and more partners. So some of these are low hanging fruits that I was talking to you about, which is like bill payments or whether it is fixed deposits. What is exciting is the unknowns. So we don't know what will happen, and that's what excites me the most. So
Yeah, and what I was getting at was also obviously the innovation is something you guys are doing. You're still dependent on the infra. You're still dependent on the banking partners, like you said. Obviously the folks like Google and distribution channels who choose to use your innovation to sort of distribute it. So these are, you're still a product company in that sense, right? These are the
For sure.
products you're building, and there'll be many more such products which you will reimagine.
For
Um,
sure.
s- so
For by the
what
way,
is,
so
yeah.
we've been kind of so obsessed about this. Like we almost are operating in a place where a little bit like Google for financial products, if at all, if we were to think of the way we are structured, a lot of
Mhm.
work went into like building engineering infrastructure, which enables our engineers and PMs to envision and do things. So if you see, we launched and went live with our first product in March 2020, right?
Mhm.
15 months later, now we have almost 7 to 8 products live.
Hmm.
uh, so and
Massive,
we
yeah.
grew, and it's post pandemic. So if we were able to do this in 1.5 years, and as you know, the pain, a lot of pain of a startup is also about building the company itself is a product. And so
Correct.
finding
Correct.
product market fit of the company itself was a hard part. So now I feel like, okay, we have done the first summit. If we were able to do all of this, in our young, hungry, scrappy way in the last 15 months, I'm like, okay, there's so much more we can do in the next few years,
Correct.
because you have all your compounding effects. Like you have people, you have infra, you have partnerships, so that's kind of been the one of the most exciting things, because you are right. So we are a product company, and like our job is to reimagine some of these products day in and day out, and we want to measure ourselves on the number of products we build, and also
Mhm.
very happy with on number of things we will fail. So that's something that we are trying to learn, because usually as a startup, given that our risk tolerance is so low, you have only one
Mm.
shot at getting right in life, right?
Mm.
We have taken a little bit of the path not very often taken, which is like
Mm.
become like a lab and do all of these experiments and see what flies.
Hmm.
So now
Hmm.
And
whether
knowing some will fail.
100%, and we're still learning on how to
Of
take that.
course. Of course.
But yeah, that's kind of how the journey has been. So
And that's a bold approach, to be honest. Like you said, not most startups do that. It's depends on probably your vision, your conviction, your
correct.
probably your investors conviction behind you to sort of do this. But I think it's
one
also
one
what was
important
needed. Yeah.
one important thing also is, yeah, it's needed. And second is also, why do we not do this, is also like, what is the cost of doing these things, in the sense that typically what happens when you think about a product, you're thinking about like 5 6 PMs, you're thinking about 30 40 engineers, on a kind of an average decent scale. At
This is
Setu,
very
for
Bangalore
us,
statement to make, but okay.
okay,
Immediately
maybe.
10, 15, 30, 40. Like, no, usually Bombay is like, do mil gaya na, theek hai, we'll make
No,
something.
so
So,
I think, yeah, I think like, yeah. So given that it's so hard now that so we actually have kept our input costs down. So all of our products are actually 1 PM, 2 engineers, 3 engineers. So we're literally
right.
like 2 pizza teams doing all of these things, and the way Sahil and I have been thinking about this is like, we're like a little bit of like capital allocation managers. Like, one is
Mhm.
human capital and the other one is like actual capital, and empowering these small teams to go out problems and solve problems that they are passionate about. So
Nice.
usually, when we are looking for people at Setu, we are like, dude, were you trying to solve some fintech problem and did you get screwed by, integration or by the market? Come here. This is the place you solve for people,
Very
that you.
nice.
So it's kind of become a house of, people who have been, bruised and battle, who have been in the battle of building fintech products, and say, come build this infra so that someone else should not go through this pain.
Which is pretty much everybody
Nice.
working in this space like more than 5 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Because it really has become much better. As you mentioned, the banks have become much more cooperative. But I remember hearing stories from people back then that you couldn't get anything done if you had to work with a bank. That's where things went to die. So
Yeah.
it's great to hear that that changes there. I wanted to kind of, I interrupted you when you were answering the earlier question, right? A little bit about the business model.
Right.
If you could just kind of give us some
Yeah.
insight into how that
For
works.
sure. Yeah. Again, going back to the idea that I was talking about, simplification.
Mhm.
I just want to simplify things, and there are just two business models in financial services. Honestly, probably three. The one is what we call as transaction-based business model, right? So usually for enabling infrastructure like payments and data, it's a transaction-based business model. So every time, let's say, Ujjivan collects money from its end customer, there is a small fee that they pay for collecting that money. And in the payments world, it's known as MDR, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And the only way to monetize this is to operate this at high volume, right? So, and it's gone are the days, it's now a low margin high volume game, right? So
Right.
that's one business model. So every time a transaction happens, we make money. The second business model is AUM based business model, which is every time you bring in a deposit, or every time if you make a sachet size loan happen, you get a percentage of the amount, right?
Mm.
So these are the only two business models.
Right.
Honestly,
Mm.
banks, fintechs, everybody, you can basically represent all of this in just these two models. Either people have transaction pricing, or people have AUM based pricing.
Mm.
There is, I think, a third business model that is yet to emerge, which is not there yet, which is the services angle, which
Mhm.
is, I strongly believe that like I started,
Mm.
I
This is
always
the
felt,
crypto example.
no, I felt like banking is always a service, right?
Mhm.
Right.
So, if you go to a bank and you say, boss, I want my bank statement for the last 6 months, they probably charge you like $150.
Mhm.
You withdrawing money from an ATM is actually a service. So you pay 25 rupees. While those services will probably cease to exist because, as things get digital, I think there is another, probably, I don't know, a large value to be unlocked in actually advisory services to come to people,
Mhm.
which is today doesn't exist. And I think
Mm.
an example of this exists in the form of RIAs, in the SEBI world. You have investment advisors. For example,
Yeah.
you can go to small case today and
Correct.
and pay a subscription fee to somebody like a Capital Mind, and suddenly you have access to the best minds in, and you could be somebody in Assam, and you don't need to be in Bombay anymore. It
Yeah.
seems like still
Yeah.
to make money.
Yeah.
So you can be actually in a small town in Assam and get access to this advice. uh, I think the advisory services is currently only focused on the top 1% of the country. I do think the rest of the 99% will also require that service. I think India is a service-driven economy. Even in a small town, someone goes and gets a shave done, even though they can
Yes.
get it done.
Right.
So I think there is a notion in all of us that people don't want to pay in India. I think it's a little bit of a misled notion from the fact that we have used a reverse intensive to incentives to acquire users and things like that, right? Like I started my career at Tally. Everybody pays for Tally. I mean, sure, there are people who are who use pirated Tally, but as times change, people are ready to pay for it,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
I think this notion of people will not pay doesn't exist. Like if you have to go see a doctor, you pay money today. So I think there is a equivalent of doctors who can look at someone's financial life and give some good advice, because today everyone who gives advice is misaligned incentives. They are trying to sell
Yes.
you a product.
Yeah.
Your
Correct.
banker will come and tell you, सर
Correct.
आपको टर्म इंश्योरेंस लेना ही है क्योंकि ये आपका माने लाइफ चेंज कर देगा
Mhm.
टाइप्स, राइट? द
Correct.
रीजन व्हाई ही इज सेइंग ऑल दीस थिंग्स इज बिकॉज़ द सेल्स incentives for the month is aligned to this.
Right.
Correct.
I think there is no one in the service of the customer today, and I think that's the missing gap, and that gap can probably get filled if all these things happen in digital. You'll probably have like a services slash advisory layer. We are seeing that already happen in education today, right? So what is edtech really? You didn't,
Yeah.
what we were not able to solve through physical teachers, we are, better teaching, so people are getting access to these guys, in some, and I think there is probably some convergence of fintech and edtech that could happen like 5 years from now. Like ticker tape, for example, is a great example, Shil.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sure you use ticker
Advisory.
tape, and
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so there is probably a ticker tape for 100 million people equivalent. That might be. It might not be on stocks and stuff like that. It might be probably something else on
Just
how to
prudent
save better.
financial advice and
Yeah,
bundles
yeah.
you might want to use given your object. Yeah, actually, so many of the a lot of this
That's the
goal-based investing is also I've
exactly.
seen become a trend, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you just
Like
have to package it right.
chartered accountants, for example, right? So everyone uses CAs today because their taxes are so complicated. Like
Yeah.
you can't do GST, you can't do income tax. So even if it's a 100-200 rupee kind of a business per year, if you're serving 100 million people, you're looking at like $100-200 million revenue business. So I think that is yet to be unlocked. So it just comes down to these three things, Amit. One is transaction pricing, AUM based pricing, and the services
Service
pricing.
price. So who I get the I get the broad models, right? But my so does a bank so basically if like or does it depend, right? Depending on the service.
Sure.
I'm just trying to like if
Sure,
for
sure,
a company
sure.
like
In
yours,
a
is
in
is it
a
the
in a in a transaction pricing business model, it's usually the person who's consuming the service. For
okay?
example, let's say Ujjivan wants to use our e-sign APIs. Let's say okay, IIFL wants to use our e-sign APIs and to power their account opening flows.
Hmm.
So whenever they make a transaction, they pay us like a fee for that, right?
Okay.
So that's on the consumption side. Whoever consumes the service and is
Is the
able
one
to
who makes
Yeah.
it.
is one way. In the case of the AUM based pricing, at the end of the day, it is the value that we are adding to the bank or an NBFC.
Correct,
Right.
right.
So what usually when we go to banks and businesses, we don't talk to them as technology service providers. We basically say, guys, we will actually be your, think about us like almost like being a digital branch of yours. And through APIs, we will drive business to you. So you
Right.
measure us on the business that we drive, and then you pay us, the incentive for driving that business to you.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
And
Makes
we
sense.
usually share this revenue that we make with the partners that we work with.
Okay.
So it's like we follow this principle called the work done principle for pricing. Like, so basically based on the, it's very popular in the telecom world on how the interconnect charges are set up, who gets what, and so on. Essentially it's really like about the kind of work that we do and how much should we earn and how much should we share. So
Interesting. Very cool.
And
Thanks.
all of this is obviously there's so much innovation you just spoke about, right? Especially I love the world that is yet to come in a lot of ways, where this is so much more democratized, all obviously digital, and the fact that you guys exist, right, and are building this means that you no longer are initially I was going to relate to you as the API only sort of building the plumbing of the internet or the plumbing of the financial world. But clearly you've added the value very quickly on top of that. So you're not just the Twilio comparisons of the rest of the world, right? It is
correct.
a lot. It is a few things more than that. So this value addition, I had a earlier question, which is just like, what is stopping others from building this value themselves? Like, I'm just curious as to the VC question about moat. Obviously the labs approach, I get it, but given that these rails are fairly available now and encouraged to be used, and banks talk to us now and like throwing red tape at us, what's stopping others? Do you think that, or do you think innovation will come from various more and more places all over in fintech?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I genuinely think the way we see our role is like to play the role of like, can we accelerate all of this? If you ask me, will this happen? Without us, I think the answer is for sure yes. it is very logical. I think it is something that will anyway end up happening. We see the role of us playing to be more of an accelerator and saying,
Got it.
can we, what could happen in 10 years, can we do that in 5 years, and so on. So from
So,
a I think,
hey,
like as you rightly said, I think for any business, irrespective of what we do, and I think it's the rule of business, right? So there'll always be, when there's value being created, there'll always be people who will come and
Uh,
compete.
sorry,
Sorry,
sorry, there
Nikhil.
was some audio glitch.
Yeah.
Oh, I think my Siri
Something
opened up.
happened.
So sorry. Should we
Yeah.
st-
So
Ah,
should we
some,
start again?
just do that part
yeah,
again.
just
Yeah,
this
maybe
question. We can take
just
this
the
question
answer.
again. Yeah.
Just your answer. Saying, will this happen without us? Yes.
Yeah. So I think, will this happen without us? The answer is yes. The way we see our role is like playing the role of an accelerator. What could happen in 10 years? Can we make that happen in 5 years? And, and so on. And I think, as you rightly pointed out, and as and VCs are also right about this, like, I think for every business, these problems still remain, which is like, whenever there is value getting created, there'll be a lot more people who will definitely run towards wanting to do this. I
Yeah.
think, there's really nothing you can stop about it, especially in the game of innovation. If it is
Yeah.
invention, I think, we're not doing that. We're not, like, say, trying to figure out like how to build the next quantum computing, or solving a problem like that, right? uh,
Hmm.
so I think the value creation layer for us is like, building like a great, I mean, first is like understanding this domain knowledge. And like I said, a lot of our problem is just about predicting or figuring out where the
Hmm.
future is going to go. And I think that
That's
itself requires a lot of thinking, and and a lot of risk about being comfortable about being wrong as well. So that's like number one.
your
We're not,
your
so
job is
so
just showing what is possible in that sense.
in the sense, like, we are not building for the problems of today, but for like tomorrow,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
and I think, like, that's number one. I think second, building a great distribution engine like everybody else is, is important. Third is, add enough value in your product so that people don't have to go to anyone else. Luckily for us, coming back to the API story, honestly, for all the song and dance that we do about India and a land of devs and all of that stuff, we don't really have a high bar for APIs. Honestly,
Mhm.
I mean,
Okay. Yeah.
how many companies do you know? Where is, we know Twilio, we talk about Stripe,
Postman.
we have friends in Postman, Browser Stack, and that too,
Yeah.
it is possible, but there aren't enough examples, right?
That's
And
true.
I
That's
think
true. Not enough. Yeah. Not enough. Clearly.
and I also think it's a function of where we are as a technology ecosystem in India. The Valley
Hmm.
has been around for such a long time, where devs actually make a decision about which product to use and so on and so forth. I
Yeah.
think that shift is happening in India. When some of our customers that we talk to, the devs make a decision. It's very clear when we talk to a few companies which are global and are coming to India, they ask us for uptimes. They are like, dude, your P20 response is like this much. Why is this, like, this can't work for us? Like, this has to be better.
Right.
Whereas when we talk to an Indian equivalent, they're like, "ये margin क्यों इतना कम है?" Like, this thing. I think that shift will happen. I mean, I'm at least like making a bet on it. And
Hmm.
honestly, it's a wide space. There aren't just good, beautiful APIs in India, and there are pockets of these APIs available, which is a sign that this is to come. Okay, let me frame this problem another way, right? I think there are going to be more APIs in the future than they are today, for sure,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Whether it
No
is
doubt.
for
No doubt.
whether many things, right? So, like, across this thing. And I think that people really obsessing about product managing APIs, building a developer experience for this, I think that's a skill that is yet to be built. And I wish that there are more and more companies do this, because I think, like, as an ecosystem, we will generally bring the bar
Get
high.
better.
Today the bar is so low that we put a lot of love and effort into writing our docs, and people don't really give a shit about it. But like we're like, okay, someday
Someday, someday. Yes, I know the feeling.
we will
I
continue
know
to
the
do
feeling.
what we want to do. So, but someday people will give a shit about it. So.
Nice, nice. Nikhil, on that note, I mean, it's a perfect time to sort of plug if you guys are hiring, some closing thoughts. What are you looking for? Who you've obviously spoken so much about the kind of people who are on your team. So clearly, a lot more folks like that would love to join
We
you. So you want to
we
give your
actually
Twitter handle or something where you
Oh
can really.
yes, people can follow me on Twitter at the rate Nikhil Kumar KS, NIKHILKUMARKS. You can follow us on Setu _API. So on to people, I think you should actually go to our teams page and check out. There's a lot of a lot of our identity as a team has also been defined not just by finance but also by music. So a lot of we do a
Nice.
lot of cool stuff at Setu. One of them which I'm really proud of is like we have a Slack channel where we discover and share music every day, even if someone's not doing work, but there's at least music running in the company. So much so, I think we are probably one of the only few companies who has put out a public playlist of the company on our website. So you can
Nice.
actually go check out our Spotify playlist and you can judge us by the kind of people that we are based on the
Lovely.
music that we listen to. But jokes aside, as I said, we are working on stuff that will basically change, cutting edge stuff. We're working on things like UPI, which will change, which has changed and will a lot more change the way people. We are building real stuff, right? So you'll be able to see that impact of what we're doing. We're working on things like BBPS. We're working on things like fixed deposits. We're working on loan products. We're working on account aggregator, which is essentially this consented data sharing framework, which will basically change our own lives. For me, the biggest joy of building UPI is that I'm a super happy customer today, right? And every time when I use it, I'm like, God damn, it still works. It works as expected. I think the opportunity at Setu is to build stuff which is real, which can be experienced by people around you, people even by ourselves. And as Sahil keeps saying, it is incumbent upon the best of us to build for the rest of us, right? So
Wow.
so it's very important. We are all in a privileged position. We have gotten here. We've been blessed with Saraswati, smart people, and it is important that we put our time and energy into solving for real people, and use software to solve users' problems. So we are hiring across functions. I would love to work with people, who have a creator's mindset, who want to change on product. On the engineering side, like everybody else, we're looking for amazing folks to come and join us. And one thing that we can assure you for sure is if you come to Setu, and if at all, whenever you leave, you will definitely leave as a more wiser, a learned person. We focus a lot on learning as a company. It's one of our cultural values. So if you're here to learn, if you're here to build meaningful stuff, please look us up. You can look at us up. You can look up all the open roles on setu.co/careers. Yeah, and you can mail me at nikhil@setu.co, and would love to chat.
Awesome. Awesome.
Thank you
Amit,
so much, Jill, and thanks,
you're up.
Amit.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. I just wanted to kind of remind everybody really quickly that it'd be great if you could give us a rating or a review wherever you're listening to this. If you're on Apple Podcasts, ratings help, reviews help. Wherever else you're listening, if you can rate or review this, it'd be great. Also, do reach out to Shiladitya or myself on social media if you want to discuss this conversation or any of the other
Yes.
conversations.
Absolutely. Nikhil, thank you so much. This was enlightening as always. And of course, I loved the range of topics that we were able to cover. I mean, it's a perfect, I would say, afternoon chat where we were able to talk everything from the Big Lebowski to building future financial products for India. So amazing. Thank you so much. Great,
Thank
great
you
to
so
talk to
much,
you about
Thank
all
Shiladitya.
you.
this.
Thanks so much, Amit. It was such a pleasure.
Thanks.
Looking forward.
IVM.